And so then I'll get started. Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to start admitting folks. Janelle, you see all the screen share icons at the bottom? That's all good? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
see it all.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to start letting some people in. All right, we're quickly getting up to 50 participants here.
We're close.
All right.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I am Jill Andrus. I am the Region 5 representative for the Idaho Children's Trust Fund Board. And I just want to welcome you and thank you all for being here this morning. We are really excited to have Janelle Stauffer back with us again this year. We got to enjoy her information last year and we were so excited to see her back. So Janelle, I want to, before I say that, I do want to take a minute. We have Carling here with our tech support. And if any of you are having trouble hearing it or with anything, you can chat her, like privately chat her, and she will help you. We're so grateful for that I don't have to do that part. So Janelle, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill. And I'm honored to be here again. This is actually maybe the third or fourth time I've presented at the Strengthening Families Training Institute. Of course, the second time online because we did last year's online. I'm excited to see that we have something like 56 participants. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen while I introduce myself. My name is Janelle Stauffer, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have a private practice over here in Nampa, Idaho, where I specialize in stress, trauma, and attachment. And I see people from all ages, birth all the way to the end. I have recently become certified as an infant mental health specialist. But before that was doing attachment work for a very long time. I also teach at Boise State University in their social work program. I think that's about it with me. I'm excited to share today about attachment, play, and resilience. The goal today is for us to chat a little bit about attachment. This will be sort of a bit, we'll introduce attachment and go through it from an introductory lens. Attachment is, in my opinion, so important. It's really the way we've all come to be as humans, so I just can't really get enough about it. And what we're learning these days from really since the decade of the brain, which started in the 90s, we're learning some really significant and important parts about attachment and how it lives inside our body. We have this really great theory that was discovered and presented by Stephen Porges called the Polyvagal Theory that we can't disregard when we're talking about attachment. And we're going to be going into that slightly today, just a little bit, while we talk about the importance of play. Not just in infancy and childhood, as we see in these pictures, but truly across the lifespan. And we're going to explore the ways play facilitates stress reduction in children. It helps wire their states for an open and receptive way of living, and moves them into healthy relationships in the future. And it lives inside their body. We're going to talk about that. We'll also get a little bit practical with it and talk about some theories of ways that we engage play and ways that we can teach parents to engage play in order to promote attachment. So my hope is over the next hour-ish, we have a hard stop. We have to stop right at 9:15 so you can bounce into the next presentation. And so we really just have about an hour to pull all of this off, but I'm pretty optimistic that we can do that. Before we get started, before I start sharing some more screens, I want you guys to just spend a minute looking at these pictures. And of course, it's easy to smile when we look at these pictures. So just take maybe 30 seconds and notice what's going on in these pictures. Notice the bodies of the children and the parents, the facial expressions, the eyes, and notice what happens inside your own body when you look at them. I'll let you do that for the next few moments. All right, would anybody be willing to share by either unmuting and sharing or chatting in the chat box what you notice coming up for you when you look at these, or what you observe in the pictures, what you notice inside your body? Would anybody be willing to share? Kids leaning in, joy, eye contact. They make me smile. I smile too. Love and happiness. They're all building attachment. Makes me think about my children and grandchildren. Connection, caring. Yeah, good. It seems to be, we seem universal, even though there's about 63 subjective experiences here in this this Zoom meeting. It seems like it's bringing on or triggering similar type of experiences inside of all of us. And I think that's important to note. Reading, bonding, yeah, interaction is key. That's true. We're going to actually talk about that today. Looks happy. It's almost impossible to not smile when you look at this. There's something really important going on. And I'm going to name just a few things and then we'll dive into it more as we go along. You know, we're wired. We are wired that when we see certain things happening interactionally between people or with people, if we're involved with it, we're wired to experience it inside our bodies. So, you know, this top picture, the one of the little boy with the blue eyes, the mom kissing his cheek, and he's clearly smiling and looking at the camera. If you look at his face, there is some obvious softening in very important parts of his face. Around his eyes, there's a muscle that surrounds his eyes that is extremely soft. And we're wired from birth to know that when that muscle is soft, then it's safe and open and free, and it sends a direct message through our vagus nerve right directly to our heart, believe it or not, that says, all is well, we are safe, and it begins developing muscle memories of those sorts. And we start walking around, engaging similarly with one another and understanding what is safe or unsafe without any words or anything exchanged. We start right there in the face. We can also tell when we look at each of these faces that they perceive the same to be true, that in these interactions, they are responding interactionally because they are receiving the same messages from the people that they are interacting with. It's a pretty phenomenal thing. We're observing it and watching it on these pictures, and it's opening up the same thing in us. So it's important to note that and pay attention to that. We will bring this up as we move forward in this presentation. Cute pictures. Almost sad to move forward from this, but we have to. All right, let's talk about attachment. What is it exactly? Attachment is the word we use to describe the relationship between caregivers and children. We understand this space, that relational space, to be what we call a holding space. It's a relationship that holds the child while their brain is being developed. In the earliest years when development is happening, that space is the child's entire world. You'll remember from, introductory psychology classes or just reading a book on psychology, you'll remember Erickson's stages of development, psychosocial stages of development. And in that first year, we think it goes longer than the first year, however, but in that first year, the child's developing trust versus mistrust. And literally, and that gets, that trust versus mistrust gets generalized to the entire world, but it starts in that little world of that holding space where the child comes to be. We understand that children, we're interesting humans. Actually, humans are very interesting. We're interesting mammals. We are called an altricial species, which means that our development doesn't stop at birth. So most mammals are fully developed and ready to be independent after they are born. Humans are not, that's not the case. Our brain, our nervous system actually continues to develop for 36 months after birth. That's an important attachment time. And we are continually trying to transmute it internally so that we can live independently. Our brain keeps developing all the way up until age 25, actually. And so we are an altricial species, totally dependent upon mature nervous systems through this attachment relationship. It's kind of an important deal. Bowlby, who we consider to be the sort of father of one of the fathers of attachment theory back in 1969, said that attachment is an inborn system in the brain that evolves in ways that influence and organize motivational, emotional, and memory processes with respect to significant caregiving figures. So hopefully it's clear, attachment is so important for how each and every one of us comes to be as human. Where it's the first line of attachment is to provide safety so we don't literally die, because we happen to know that babies will die if they don't have that first line. And then the next line that it goes once safety is in place is connection and growth. And so it starts with safety that moves into connection and growth, a really important thing. Why attachment? Why is it important? Of course, I've already mentioned that we would literally die without it. We would. But here's some broader views of it. One, attachment develops in every human, their relationships and their worldviews. We call the worldviews and their template for relationships, we call it working models. That was from Bowlby's theory. We've now moved it into neuroscience, thanks to the decade of the brain and amazing attachment scientists that have moved from just a behavioral theory now into a neurobiological theory, are saying that we are wiring in these early years our way, a template, a pathway in our brain from which we then go forward into the world and view the whole world from it. And we answer the questions, can I depend on people? Can I trust people? All starts in those early years. Then the second one, self-regulation and social regulation. So, because we're altricial, we are dependent upon mature nervous systems to regulate our own nervous system. And the process of this happening over and over again in that attachment relationship creates what's called self-regulation and social regulation. It literally cannot happen unless it's been modeled and done for us in that early attachment relationship. We end up developing emotion regulation, social skills, and empathy because of all of that. And then the third one main reason we're here, and one of my soapboxes really, and why I study attachment, is resilience. I really believe this. Some people might disagree with me, but I get to say this because I'm a specialist in this area, that perhaps one of the most important protective factors is attachment, so specifically a secure attachment. When we gift our children with secure attachment, we are gifting them with a safety net inside themselves that they carry around with them and makes them more resilient to adversity and stress. And so, you know, in my therapy office, if I have a kiddo who experienced some form of trauma, let's say a car accident, let's go easy and say a single incident trauma car accident. If a kid comes in with a secure attachment, we'll likely work through that trauma in a very short period of time, if it needs to be worked through at all. Whereas a kiddo with an insecure attachment will take much longer to bounce back and heal from that trauma because they don't have the internal safety net. So attachment truly is a gift of resilience to a kiddo's and all humans' nervous system. Here's what a secure attachment promotes. And by the way, I'm not going to talk about this a ton today because it's not what we're talking about, but a secure attachment is developed by the presence of what Winnicott called good enough caregivers. So I like to bring it up because you don't have to be perfect to create secure attachment in kids when you're a parent. You just have to be good enough. And good enough does not mean making sure that you've purchased all organic food and picked only the most perfect schools and the perfect clothes. That's not what we mean about when we say good enough. Good enough refers to connection, ability to reflect emotion, and sort of a coaching feature, which maybe next time I'll do good enough caregiver training. Today we're doing play, but I like to bring it up just in case you start to get worried about that at all. But here's what a secure attachment promotes: flexible self-regulation, the ability internally to self-regulate, pro-social behavior, empathy, positive sense of emotional well-being and of self-esteem. We now know that a recent study came out and shows that it's also developing a sense of self-compassion, or the ability to turn towards oneself with love and compassion, which is an amazing resiliency skill all the way through the lifespan. Here's a really important one: the creation of a coherent life story and a coherent sense of self. What we know about people who have been through trauma is that we develop, the biggest wound is that we don't have a coherent sense of self. And the healing actually comes in creating a coherent life story. Either consciously or unconsciously, implicitly or explicitly. All of this came from Dan Siegel, one of our great neurobiologists who studies attachment these days. His name probably sounds familiar to many. Here's what human brain development looks like during the attachment years. Really, attachment years goes all the way through the lifespan. We're trying to form attachments all the way till we die. But when the part we're talking about here is the way the brain develops in relationships, specifically in the early years. You'll notice in the first 3 years, how much synaptogenesis or synapse formation is happening. Huge amounts in those first 36 months of life. We think 700 per second in those first 36 months of life is going on. And we know that development happens sequentially. And so what has to happen in these early years of development influences what happens afterwards. So pretty significant brain development going on here. So what is needed exactly for all of those synapses or synaptogenesis, the formation of synapses, to take place? And there is one we know for sure. It's called serve and return interactions with human beings. We are wired to grow in relationship and in interactions that go back and forth. Serve and return interactions with human beings. Our brains develop in this form. When we express something and somebody expresses something back, it feeds babies' brains. It even feeds our own brains to continue developing. I want to show you this. This might be something that some of you have seen before. I forgot to load this up, of course, but it'll be easy to get to. I think I have to share my screen again to do this, so hang tight. It's worth it, I promise.
And if there's audio, make sure you click that share audio
you.
button too on the way back in. Okay, cool.
Thank you very much. All right, start screen share, share sound.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm my good girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in a really ugly situation.
All right. So some important concepts there.
Nuts are one of the healthiest things you can eat. However,
Okay, so some important things there to talk about. It starts a bit chatting, allowing us to understand attachment from an interactional paradigm. So it shows what a secure attachment does. It allows the serve and return relationships to actually soothe the baby's body and allows them then to open into an open and receptive place, where then they move towards what's going on, they lean into the play, and truly they grow from there. That becomes their safe base where they can go and explore. And then you saw, and you probably felt it inside your body, quite literally, when she turned around and had the still face. And you saw the baby try everything to begin trying to interact and play really with the mom. And you saw fairly quickly that when the baby was not getting a response from the mom, that the baby went into distress, and that you may have felt in your body as well. Your own heart rate may have elevated because your own mirror neurons were at play there, which is also what's going on in attachment. And the baby's body in distress made the baby want to respond either more, cried, reached out more, and eventually, we didn't see it in this case because the mom corrected quickly, but eventually it would turn into a inner withdrawal. Now, we're really talking about the forms of attachment here. We've got a secure attachment, the one where reciprocal interactions are happening in a good enough form. The baby's open and receptive, can lean in and continue to grow. That's a secure attachment. That happens when we have the presence of a good enough caregiver. Something like research suggests 36, I've seen 36 to 50% recently, but 36 was the standing number up until a recent study. 36% of the time of good enough caregiving, whereas the rest of it was not traumatic. Then we've got the insecure attachments, which you can sort of see playing out in this own baby's body. So the mom is not receptive. She's got the blank stare. She's not engaging in the serve and return relationship. And the baby becomes anxious and begins reaching out and trying to respond. Over time, with enough of those interactions, a baby may develop what's called an anxious attachment style. Sort of, are you there for me is the question, and the answer often is no, and so they have to keep trying. The other form of insecure attachment is avoidant attachment, and that would be when enough of these interactions happen and the parent was not present enough for a myriad of reasons, and the baby has to do an inner withdrawal, and that is an avoidant attachment style. We've got a third insecure attachment style, and that's called the disorganized attachment style. And usually the disorganized attachment style comes from just more than inattentive parenting or blank stare parenting. It can come. It usually also involves some form of trauma or very severe attachment disruption. And that's where a child is both anxious and avoidant at the same time. And we call that the disorganized attachment style. Of course, secure attachment is the goal. It creates inside kiddos and humans that safety net that then makes them more resilient and adaptive to stress. Whereas insecure attachment decreases the ability to respond to stress. And truly, that stress response that you saw in that baby, it becomes internalized and it becomes a state. And so we understand that many of these kids have bodies that are wired differently because they haven't had enough time in that secure, open, and receptive space, and it impacts their development. Something that's going on really important here on this slide is this theory called Polyvagal Theory. I'm curious, has anyone heard or studied Polyvagal Theory? Go ahead and chat it, or you can unmute and tell me. Anyone studied Polyvagal Theory? I'm just wanting to get a good sense here.
I have a little bit.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, that's the three pathways, right?
Right.
So it basically brings into concept the freeze side of things, which is not as understood or hasn't been talked about as much.
That's right. That's a freeze and actually the fawn. That's really good. Okay, I'm getting a good sense of where we're at. Thanks for sharing up, guys. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Polyvagal Theory. It's really important in play, and it's really important for all of us, even adulthoods. So I'm going to give you the very basics that the woman whose name I couldn't see when she was speaking just shared some basics. I'm going to tell you, we all have this vagus nerve that really is fairly amazing. It was Stephen Porges was studying it in the 90s and helped us understand it and really gave us a pathway into understanding the connection between the mind and the body. This vagus nerve moves down the nervous system, and it has all these little nerve endings. I don't know how many. I sometimes say millions, but that's because I'm a clinical social worker and I haven't actually gone to med school to study the vagus nerve. So it's a lot of little tiny nerves that go down and connect the nervous system to every other organ and part of the body. So it comes down, it connects up through the face, comes down, connects to the heart, goes down, connects to the major organs, the viscera, and then down. And basically this genius thing makes it very possible that the mind-body connection can become instantaneous. So as soon as I see an unsafe person with my eyes, the message immediately goes down to my viscera to tell me exactly how to respond. It's very genius. But it plays a significant role in attachment. And there are 3 branches of the vagus nerve. We're going to talk about 2 branches today. One is the dorsal vagal branch, and the other is the ventral vagal branch. The dorsal vagal takes care of our rest and digest side of things. When we engage the dorsal vagal side of our vagus nerve with safety, when it's safe, we are able to rest and digest. This is what we go into when we go get a massage, and it's a safe massage center. We're able to relax. When I held my daughter after she was born, and she recognized my voice and my smell and all the things that babies do, her body was able to rest right into mine and feel like almost melt, you know what I mean, into my body when I held her. That is the dorsal vagal. Really important for love and connection. When you fall in love with somebody and you're on your 100th date and you're enjoying one another and you just hug one another and you rest into them, that's your dorsal vagal. So many things. When you're meditating and you've come to this sense of calm, that's your dorsal vagal. Now, we just talked about what it looks like in the dorsal vagal when it's safe. The dorsal vagal also plays a role when it's unsafe. So what happens when we engage the dorsal vagal when it's unsafe is we move into the freeze response, which is one of our survival mechanisms. We've got fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. The freeze response lives in our dorsal vagal. So if I go up into the mountains and I get chased by a bear, there's no chance of running to make me survive or fighting back to survive, I will freeze. And that lives in my dorsal vagal. When a child is forced to leave their attachment figure, their safe person, and go into a stressful environment that they're unprepared for, their dorsal vagal will engage and move them into a freeze response. So that's the dorsal. Then we've got the ventral vagal, which actually we're going to spend the rest of today talking about. This is the part of our vagus nerve that when it is safe, this is the part where we can enter into the world and play and connect with the world. It is so important. This part, when it's engaged, the ventral vagal, another word we use for it is the social engagement system. It's the part that when we when we meet somebody and they smile at us and laugh at us, we immediately smile and laugh back. We want to play with them. We want to connect with them. It's the babies in all those pictures we saw at the very beginning were in their social engagement. When we're in our social engagement, the vagus nerve sends messages down to all of our organs and it says, man, all is good. Go and do what you got to do. Digest that food just fine, or get some energy to run and hike and play, or let your heart be open, metaphorically speaking. All those things are happening because the vagus is saying all is well. It is possible to be in the ventral vagal with unsafety. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. It's sort of like a 401 class, but when we are, one of our stress response systems in our ventral vagal path is called our fawn response. It's a fairly new defense system that we understand these days, and it's the part where we have to please the other in order to stay safe. So write the word fawn, F-A-W-N, down, maybe go research it because we won't be studying it in this class today. But we will be talking about the ventral vagal or social engagement system and the play part and how important it is for attachment today. It's one thing I just want to be sure to point out is that all of this theory tells us that everything lives unconsciously inside the body. So even while we're talking about it, you yourself may be noticing your own vagus nerve engaging. When I say social engagement system, you might notice, depending on your personal experiences, of course, something happening in your body. When I say social engagement system, it feels very positive to me. I think about play and my body opens up and kind of goes into that place. That's because this thing we're talking about and attachment that we're talking about does not live on the top part of our brain where we generate words. It lives in the vagus. It lives in our body. It's in a felt sense of safety and connection. That is where attachment lives. It's so important to understand that because, you know, here I am a therapist. I spent probably the first 7 years of my career trying to teach people attachment experiences on the top part of their brain. So I would go and teach parenting classes, really valid. Parenting classes are super important, but I would sit there and teach approaches. And I would forget, because I hadn't learned about the Polyvagal Theory just yet, that actually the real learning for attachment lives in the felt sense experience. It lives in our vagus, and it lives very distinctly in play, which is what we'll move into next. It's really important to understand as well that what we're talking about is that it doesn't stop with infancy. Of course, it's super important in infancy, and it's super important in early childhood and middle childhood and adolescence, but it is equally as important for different reasons in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and all the way up into the end of life. A healthy dorsal response and a healthy ventral response follows us across the lifespan. The experiences we have as we are developing, and our experience of a safe dorsal response and a safe ventral response teaches our bodies how to be in this world. We are literally wiring our bodies in a certain state that follows us across the lifespan. Relaxation and play are needed at all levels of development, and they keep us healthy and balanced in adulthood, and they make us more resilient to stress. And so these two little branches of the vagus nerve are very, very important. A secure attachment comes when a good enough caregiver and a good enough caregiving environment have nurtured the dorsal and the ventral response across the lifespan. So, all right, I want to tell you a little bit about mirror neurons because they play a role in what we're talking about in this vagus response. We have these little neurons. They live inside our brain, and the ones I'm going to be talking about today live specifically in the prefrontal right cortex. Mirror neurons are a type of brain cell that respond equally when we perform an action and when we witness someone else perform the action, or when we perform an action or even imagine performing an action. So these mirror neurons are really important in our brain. So you'll see, here's a great picture. Monkey does an action, the neuron fires, and monkey sees the action, the neuron also fires in almost exactly the same place. This is important in attachment because we are seeing the modeling through play and through activity happening in others, which then children, especially during those first 36 years, months of life, are then able to form neural pathways in their brain, which they can internalize and use on their own later. Another thing about mirror neurons is that they respond not only to other people's actions and emotions, but also to the intent behind those actions. So we are creating millions of mirror neurons, which mirror the neural actions and the intentions or feelings of other people. So, you know, in that picture, in that still face experiment that I had you watch, actually your mirror neurons were engaging in that same thing. And those pictures at the front of the slide that I started with, your mirror neurons were doing their job. So when you saw the mom go blank stare and you saw the baby respond in stress, it is highly likely that at that exact same time, your body was becoming activated. You may have noticed the child's anxiety, which then triggered in your prefrontal cortex anxiety of your own, which made then your body respond slightly in an anxious way. That was mirror neurons at play. And mirror neurons are at play in attachment. We are, as caregivers or teachers, our mirror neurons are giving us an inner map of the child so that we can respond and provide that holding space. It's one of the most genius aspects of humanness that we've developed this thing, created this thing that allows us to respond and hold the space appropriately for our children. But geniusly enough, the children are doing the same exact thing for us. So they are learning and wiring new pathways based on our experiences, but they are also giving us the same thing in response. And that becomes a serve and return interaction, which facilitates brain growth. So as I've been saying, those connections shape our neural connections. We are extremely social. Areas involved in self-regulation overlap with those involved in interpersonal communication and plasticity. So, you know, you hear it said, you know, these kids, we got to let them learn how to regulate themselves. We got to let them figure it out or go and do this. From an attachment perspective, you absolutely can't have kids figuring things out on their own. They only learn those things of how to self-regulate when they are involved in interpersonal communication and plasticity. Of course, early development, it's needed a lot. Later in development, like my 16-year-old needs it a bit less, but it is still needed. They still need the co-regulation in order to figure out their self-regulation. Their brains are developing all the way until age 25. At some point, they begin, usually around early adolescence, begin a process called internalization transmutation, which just means they are taking those interactions, those serve and return interactions, and they are internalizing it into their own neural pathway in their brain that then they step onto as they individuate and become their own human, and then they can do these things on their own. But they only learn them when in relationship with others. A lot of implications of that, of course. We could talk about so many things because there are so many things in our culture that tell us something different from this. Interesting ways that we are, asking kids to step up and self-regulate without taking in attachment. That might be another one we talk about someday. Cultural implications. So attachment sort of says that's a good sentiment, but that's not how the brain works. How one brain interacts with another has important effects on how the brain functions. Social interactions are one of the most powerful forms of experience that help shape how the brain gives rise to the mind. How the brain creates a connection between the human experience and the body, and we become then the human that presents forward to the world. The most powerful forms of experience. They're so unconscious. Attachment relationships are so unconscious. Like I said, they're wired into the vagus and live in the body. We move forward through the world from that state of being totally unconscious, and it starts in these social interactions. One more thing about the brain, and then I promise we'll start talking about play. Infants who experience a secure attachment secrete neurotransmitters, and they produce a sense of well-being. You can sort of see it in this picture of this little guy here. I think he's so cute. Everything about the way he's presenting shows that he is in an open and receptive place. There's no unsafety there, and it creates a state in his body of well-being, which then, interestingly enough, because it's so unconscious, carries with him all the way into adulthood. So I've got this picture of a guy maybe at work or something, experiencing well-being in the workplace, because the state of his body, this inner safety net was built in through a secure attachment. And what we know is that trauma or neglect can reduce the secretion of neurotransmitters and leave the body in an alert state through the sympathetic nervous system. And so the body then gets wired, we call it brains wired for fear, perhaps. So more prone to move towards anxiety because the body was trained to be there because of trauma and neglect for various reasons. I wanted to spend just a second. It was dependent upon how we're doing on time, and I think I've got enough time to do this. When adversity happens, and brains get wired for fear, we see all kinds of things, including a decreased ability for children to engage in playful activities. To engage in playful activities, a child has to be able to engage that social engagement system. And in order to engage the social engagement system, a child has to feel safe enough to do that. If their brain through trauma and neglect has been wired for unsafety, wired for fear, then they're living in their sympathetic nervous system rather than their vagus. The great news is that healing trauma and neglect comes from the same way we develop secure attachment, and that is engaging the vagus nerve with safety. And that's how healing happens. So whether we're healing through play in the classroom or healing through play in the therapy room or teaching parents how to play with their kids to heal trauma and neglect from a myriad of things, we do heal it in the same way. We just have to be aware that we're also dealing with states that have been wired for fear. When we've created a secure attachment, we've created what's called the circle of security. This is from a really great theory through the circle of security training. It kind of looks like this. I need you. As a kid, I need you. You're my safe base, my safe haven, a secure base, one of those, which means when I am in your presence, I experience open and receptive. I can rest and digest in that presence. My nervous system gets integrated, which then means because I'm integrated, I can go out and explore a little bit more. And the person who's providing that secure base or a safe haven is right there supporting exploration, giving them space to go and do it, present when they need to check back in. So each time a kid does this, goes and explores, more neural pathways, more synaptogenesis is happening. And then they come back and integrate it in, and then they can go explore a little bit more and a little bit further. And it keeps going around in these serve and return relationships. The parents and teachers and caregivers who are providing a secure attachment are bigger, stronger, wiser, kind, following the child's lead, and when necessary is taking charge when necessary. And so those are the things that create a good enough caregiver: bigger, stronger, wiser, kind, following the child's lead, and when necessary, taking charge. Some really important things happen in the play: watch over me, delight in me, help me, enjoy with me, enjoy to the same depth that I enjoy. And that is where play comes into attachment. For those of us that are teaching, whether we are teaching parents or teaching kids, we have an amazing opportunity to build a healthy attachment to each child in our care. We have the ability to provide a circle of security in those times, which becomes a gift to the nervous system. Of course, parents are the most important helpers, the most important. And we've created a culture, here, particularly here in the state of Idaho, where we have supportive services that help bridge the gap when things happen for many reasons that parents are needing support, not just because they are quote unquote bad parents. That's almost never been the case in my experience. There have been some. I have not worked in every avenue, but for many of parents, it's overstressed or systems of oppression or medical trauma or deployment or other things that are causing some attachment disruptions. And we have the opportunity to come in and support. All right, let's talk about play specifically here. Attachment play lives in that part of the vagus, the social engagement system, or the ventral vagal system, which leaves, when it's happening, leave kids in an open and receptive and exploratory space. Salter says playful activities can reduce stress, strengthen attachment, and solve behavior problems while bringing laughter and joy to you and the children. Play is absolutely most often the antidote for the hard stuff of life. If we can access it, it really is. And this is true across the lifespan. When we are engaging in attachment play, it's a really special kind of play. Attachment play is not side-by-side play. It is interactive play. It's very distinctively from a wiser, kinder, stronger, safe person who is interactive, and his primary goal is to strengthen connections. It almost always often involves laughter. Laughter is the thing that the vagus nerve loves, specifically the ventral vagal portion branch. Attachment play can be either child or adult initiated. It absolutely does not require special equipment. It can take place anywhere, anytime. And it's kind of important that it includes many familiar activities. For attachment to happen, the pathways of the brain which register novelty need to be not the primary mode of operation for that time. So there can be some new novel activities, but for attachment to be safe and to feel good, it also needs to have many familiar activities. The parts of the brain that register novelty is different than the parts of the brain that registers familiar activities. And we want the parts of the brain with familiarity to be there because that equals safety. Here's what attachment play is not. Sometimes it will be described by perhaps traditional parenting methods as permissive discipline, and that's not what attachment play is not. It does not teach aggression to children. It is not a form of teasing. In fact, most attachment play theorists will say teasing is absolutely not appropriate for attachment play. It does not involve competition. And it does not have any set rules. So let's go through some general guidelines set forth by a couple attachment play theorists. General guideline number 1 is to follow the child's lead and stay flexible. It's really, those of us who are adults, we've been taught the art of having to control things. And the beauty that attachment play teaches us, and that really truly children teaches us, is to let go of control. There is no control. I have a friend, she always tells this story about, she's actually a therapist, and the first time when she was an intern, she did her first play therapy session, and she left that play therapy session with extreme anxiety. Because in play therapy, the job is to follow the lead, stay flexible. My dear friend, who now is an amazing play therapist, this is when she was an intern, realized very quickly how much control she had, and how it came out in play therapy when blocks were being thrown a certain way, or maybe the sand left the sand tray momentarily, or etc. Toys didn't get put away perfectly, etc. And so there's a need to kind of like be flexible a little bit, have some boundaries, but be able to work, let the child lead and be a child. It's really important to recognize indirect invitations. Those are the child leading and inviting you in. And each time you respond, it becomes a serve and return interaction that they internalize. And then to be responsible to response. When you engage, did the child withdraw? Did they participate? Those are important things that tell you the state of the child's being. In attachment play, we want to keep a child in an open and receptive state, which means we don't want to see them withdraw. We want to see them participate and lean in. Now, if a child does withdraw, it becomes an amazing opportunity to repair. And that is also very important. Very much like you saw the mom with the blank stare, she turned around and repaired with her son, and that became so important. It becomes very important. The repair is very important in the nervous system. Guideline number 2, we do not use this time to teach or correct. Attachment play is not about putting content in the top part of the brain or teaching or correcting. The job is to keep a kid in an open and receptive place. Try and accept everything unless it's hurtful to the child, another person, an animal, or the environment. So that would be the only time. My experience is, so a lot of times we'll see this happening, and kids might begin play. And, for example, if a kiddo comes into my office, I have one that's exhibits a little bit of destructive error because he's processing some hard stuff. And when I follow him, when given the opportunity to just accept the experience, within about 5 minutes max, I would say, destruction decreases. However, if I try to stop destruction, of course, not if it's hurtful to himself or to another person, an animal, or environment, of course, but if the destruction is fairly benign and we can handle it, and I try to stop it, it keeps the destruction going for longer. And so we try to really move with it and try to accept it and watch it move. And it's not time to teach or correct. The third general guideline, I love this one. If the child is laughing, you're likely on the right track. Laughter says open and receptive. And we should change activity if we notice a fear response coming up. The fourth general guideline is that teasing is not attachment play. We may see children laugh out of embarrassment, but that does not equate the same kind of laughter that we're talking about here. That's a different kind of protective mechanism. Imitative play can sometimes turn into teasing, and we need to be sensitive about that. So teasing is not attachment play. And the fifth one, don't try attachment play if the child is crying. So when a child is crying, they are in their sympathetic nervous system. And the only answer to somebody, any human truly, who's in their sympathetic nervous response is soothing, always. And soothing is the dorsal response. Remember, the rest and digest. So it might be where we pick up a child and shh, 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 or rock the baby, because soothing is the only thing that's needed when they're there. Once they're soothed and they're ready to re-engage, that's then when we can re-engage in attachment play. But play is not the answer when a child is crying. 6, I guess I have one more. I forgot about this. Phones aren't needed in attachment play. So there's many studies out which support really good parents creating some distress in children because of their distractibility on phones. Phones are not needed in attachment play. And many people would say, I like to be nice and gentle. I like to be compassionate towards our culture. But some attachment therapists would say, do not bring phones to attachment play. And there's probably some really good answers to that. But my experience is always to be compassionate. We live in a culture where phones are present. And so they just aren't needed during attachment play. So play then is as we've been talking about, super important across the lifespan. So this thing that we've been studying, the ventral vagus, or the social engagement system, creates a state in our body which makes us resilient to stress. So when I have been able to internalize this secure method of play and the ability to engage in the world in an open and receptive place, then when I go out into the world and I face health problems, and I face a global pandemic, and I face a culture that favors productivity over laughter sometimes, I'm actually more resilient to it. The other thing that's great about play is it's actually, if you came into my therapy office and we started working on, your own anxiety, what you would hear from me in the first session and every other session thereafter is you would hear me ask, how are we engaging play? Because play is the best kind of therapy. When we engage that part of our body, the ventral vagal social engagement system, and we train our bodies to live there when needed, you can be playful in everything you do. When we train ourselves to live there, we're healing trauma, and we don't even have to talk about trauma to heal it. Isn't that great? It's what the decade of the brain has told us. And so the truth is that we really need to take life a little less seriously and take play a little bit more seriously. Here's what we know about play in adulthood is that it instantaneously relieves stress. It has to. So stress lives in the sympathetic nervous system. Play lives in the vagus, in the ventral vagus, or the social engagement system. You can't be in both of those places at the same time. So when you engage play, you are literally telling your body and the stress, goodbye for now. We're leaving the stress. And then oftentimes you can even feel within your body an actual release of the tension that was held because the sympathetic nervous system was holding it. And that oftentimes is all that's needed, is enough to switch out of it. We know there are many studies that prove that it improves brain functions. It stimulates the mind and boosts creativity. It improves relationships. It heals emotional moods, emotional wounds, I think that should say. I just can't say this enough. This is what happens in my therapy office, heals emotional wounds. And it is the perfect antidote for stress and depression. And so play in adulthood is super important. So what does it look like in adulthood? In childhood, we kind of know everything is play, basically. Well, forms of adulthood play can be everything. Play at work, we know, actually creates a more productive work environment. Laughter within the family is sort of a sign of safety for everyone. Believe it or not, sex is play. Sex actually lives in this social engagement system. Sex and intimate relationships activates the same pathways as play does. So sex is fun and playful. Of course, games in adulthood, and of course, play with pets. My favorite kind. I've actually got my pet right back here. He made a noise earlier. And some fun joking. That's how adulthood play works. When we do this, when we engage in play and we are parents, we actually then teach through the mirror neurons, through modeling and through working models, we teach our kids how to do the same. And we become healthier beings just by observation. So that's the end of my presentation. I wanted to open it up for some question and answers. Any questions or thoughts about play? Feel free to unmute and ask or chat. Any stories of attachment play you'd like to share?
I'll kind of throw in my takeaway from some of this. I teach blind and visually impaired kids, and I start right at birth, and I have them until they're 21. And, a lot of what I do when I go in at birth is teaching these parents how to connect with a child that cannot see them. And so this was really fascinating because so much of attachment is happens visually, and our kids don't have that incidental learning. And so it just, this whole presentation, I was thinking like, it just reminded me how much I need to tweak what I do to help to remind parents of how important it is to attach, even though their child can't see them and may not give them that visual feed back and forth. We have to work on, more touch, more audio, more.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up, Jill, because the vagus nerve doesn't need eyes. It's the body, it's a state of a body that, eyes are a big part. It registers things like what's going on and all of that, but it also registers tone of voice. It registers physical touch. It honestly also registers the felt sense of what's going on in the room. So movement, that kind of a thing, which can be taken in audibly, etc. The vagus nerve responds to each of that.
Yeah, that it's been very fascinating. It's really given me a lot to think about.
Oh,
So
good.
I appreciated it.
Good. Someone said they're going to add it to their volunteer training. I do it. And in fact, you should add just play to your volunteer training in general. Play around. How can you add more attachment play to your everyday routine if possible? I think this is the question we all should be asking after we study this theory. It's imperative. You have to. So how do we add it in your everyday routine? Our culture does not teach us to add play to our everyday routine, right? Our culture teaches us how to make to-do lists part of our everyday routine. And this theory really since the 90s has been saying, you guys, that's a bunch of BS. To increase productivity, you need to be engaging both your dorsal vagal and your ventral vagal, your social engagement and your rest and digest. So how do you do it? And I think that's a question you should be writing down and making little bullet points about how, if you're going to make a to-do list, make a to-do list about how to add play into your everyday life. Stephanie said, I really like what you said about not having to talk about trauma to heal it. I feel this is newer thinking for many people, and it is important I agree with you, Stephanie. Let's just say it one more time. It used to be true in trauma work that we thought you had to tell the story of your trauma. And the problem with that was that trauma stories are really scary and terrible. They open up your nervous system, and oftentimes by telling the story can re-traumatize you. This theory since the 90s has changed, has thrown that around and said, hey, actually, you don't actually have to tell the story. The story really lives in our body. And if we can get in there and heal it that way, we actually do heal trauma that way. And I can attest to that. Very rarely do we go into trauma stories in my office, and that's all we do is trauma work. So we're doing it through the vagus. And I do think, please go start telling everybody that, so we start studying it some more. It's getting out more and more, but it's taken a little while here in Idaho to get that message out. Oh man, ideas of how to facilitate play via Zoom. I hear you. A lot of therapists are asking that question and trying to figure it out. So an important thing to understand is what we're looking for in play interactions is serve and return interactions. You can do that on Zoom. There are lots of ways that you can do that on Zoom. So some good ideas there are some fairly non-competitive but fun games on Zoom that can promote play depending on age. I haven't found them for tiny little guys yet. Another one is using art back and forth on Zoom through screen share, etc. I've been using that pretty a lot with my kiddos and with parents and kiddos. Yeah, hopefully that can get some juices going there. Yeah, any other thoughts or feelings on play? I think that maybe this is a good place to stop. I think you have to be somewhere at 10:15. So I'm actually pretty happy that we have a 5-minute second. I don't like to be the reason people are late, and oftentimes I am. So this is new for me.
Thanks, Janelle, for that. I'm gonna post a link to that next gathering in the chat. And then again, if you wanted to download Janelle's slides, they will be available on Padlet this afternoon sometime. So look out for that.
Yeah.
You guys don't forget to do your evaluation.
Oh yeah, do. Thank you so much for letting me come again. And Taryn, thanks for letting me be here again. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks for coming again.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. We'll see everybody in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.